The morning the agency changed forever began like any other, except the silence felt heavier. Evelyn Harper stood alone in the elevator as it climbed toward the 14th floor of Brighton & Cole, a respected marketing agency in downtown Chicago. The city outside was waking up, traffic humming, coffee shops opening, office lights flickering on one by one. She had been making this same ride for 15 years. Long enough to know which floors smelled like fresh paint, which windows caught the sunrise best, and which corners of the office hid quiet moments after hard days. She was early. As always, Evelyn believed arriving early showed respect for the work, for the clients, and for herself. She carried a leather notebook, worn soft at the edges, filled with handwritten reminders and client notes that no digital system ever fully replaced. Her heels clicked across the polished floor as she entered the office, greeted by the familiar hum of printers and the distant sound of keyboards. This place had once been small. When she started, Brighton & Cole had only 8 employees and one nervous founder who worried about every bill. Evelyn had helped grow it into something solid. She knew which clients liked phone calls instead of emails. She knew which campaigns failed quietly and which ones saved the company during lean years. But that morning, something felt off. Her inbox refreshed, and a single email appeared at the top. Evelyn, please come to the boardroom at 9 a.m. Lucas Reed. No greeting, no explanation. Lucas Reed was the new CEO. 35 years old, sharp suits, quick smile, faster opinions. He had arrived 6 weeks ago with talk of transformation and disruption. He spoke often about trends, algorithms, and the future of branding. People listened because he spoke with confidence, and confidence carried power. Evelyn didn't dislike him. She barely knew him. She checked the time. 8:42 a.m. For a moment, she stayed still, fingers resting on the desk she had occupied for over a decade. Family photos sat in a small frame, her parents on a lake in Michigan. A picture from a company anniversary dinner years ago when everyone still laughed easily. She straightened the frame, took a breath, and stood. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Lucas stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand. 2 HR representatives sat quietly to the side, eyes lowered. No coffee, no small talk, no invitation to sit. Evelyn, Lucas said, nodding once. Thank you for coming. She smiled politely. Course, he wasted no time. I've been reviewing the structure of the agency. He began, pacing slowly, looking at where we've been and where we need to go. Evelyn listened carefully. She had sat through hundreds of meetings like this, strategy meetings, growth meetings, crisis meetings. She knew how to read a room. And this one felt wrong. Lucas stopped pacing and looked directly at her. The truth is, he said, Brighton & Cole needs a more modern direction. The word modern landed softly, but it carried weight. We need people who understand the current market, emerging platforms, new approaches, he continued. And while your contributions to this agency are appreciated, there was a pause, just long enough to sting. Your approach is no longer aligned with where we're heading. Evelyn felt a tightness in her chest. I'm not sure I understand, she said calmly. Lucas exhaled, as if preparing himself. Your methods are effective, yes, but they're outdated. Outdated, the word echoed louder than anything else. In the room, 15 years collapsed into a single label. Evelyn thought of late nights spent calming nervous clients, of weekends sacrificed to fix campaigns that no one else wanted to touch, of the relationships she built slowly, carefully, with trust instead of flash. She looked at Lucas, searching his face for hesitation. There was none. We're offering a severance package, he continued, turning his tablet slightly as if the numbers mattered more than the moment. Today will be your last day. For a second, the room seemed unreal, like a scene from someone else's life. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't remind him that nearly half the agency's biggest clients had come through her efforts. She didn't mention the years she stayed when others left. She didn't raise her voice or let her eyes fill. Instead, she nodded. "I understand," she said quietly. Lucas blinked, surprised. Perhaps he expected anger, tears, resistance. "HR will help you gather your things," he said. Evelyn turned and walked out with steady steps. As she passed through the office, a few coworkers looked up. Some smiled, unaware. Others sensed something was wrong. She returned to her desk, opened a cardboard box handed to her without words, and began packing. Each item felt heavier than it should have. Her notebook, a small plant she had kept alive for years, company mug from an old retreat in Wisconsin. She moved quickly, efficiently. No drama. When she reached the elevator, she pressed the button and waited. The doors opened with a soft chime. As she stepped inside, she caught a reflection in the glass. Lucas stood at the far end of the hall, watching. Their eyes met for half a second. His confident expression faltered. Just slightly. The doors closed. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Outside, the city was louder, brighter, unforgiving. She stood on the sidewalk with her box in hand, feeling the strange mix of loss and freedom settle in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but that meeting had not ended her story. It had only shifted the power. And somewhere high above, in a quiet office filled with new ideas and empty promises, a young CEO stared at numbers that would soon stop making sense, unaware that the woman he called outdated was about to remind everyone what experience truly meant. The first time Lucas Reed saw Evelyn Harper after firing her, he almost didn't recognize her. It wasn't that she had changed completely, but there was a new calmness about her, the confidence that made the room shift without her saying a word. It happened at a small marketing charity event in Toronto, where most of the agency world gathered to network and show off. Lucas had expected casual conversations, handshakes, smiles that meant nothing. And yet the moment he spotted her near the balcony, everything slowed. Evelyn stood elegantly, shoulders relaxed, hair falling naturally around her face, chatting softly with a former client. She laughed easily, the sound light and genuine, as if 15 years of stress had been replaced by something far more liberating. Lucas couldn't help but stare. For months he had thought firing her was the bold move that would propel Brighton and Cole forward. Instead, he was realizing how much she had quietly carried the agency on her back. Every campaign that had succeeded, every client who had stayed loyal, every bridge between the old and new she had been at the center of it all. He approached slowly, heart beating faster than he cared to admit. The crowd seemed to blur around him. "Evelyn," he said, keeping his voice neutral. She turned and their eyes met. The look she gave him was not anger, not hurt, but something stronger. "Self-assurance, Lucas," she said softly, a polite smile curling her lips. She extended her hand for a brief, firm shake. No bitterness, no need for words that would shame him, just presence. I wasn't right," Lucas said. It was more than an apology. It was a confession. For the first time in his professional life, he felt unsure. The confidence he carried into meetings, the plans he presented so smoothly they felt hollow next to her quiet authority. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I appreciate that," she said. Her voice carried no triumph, only acknowledgement. "But things have changed. For both of us, I think." Lucas swallowed. He had expected her to be hurt, to lash out, or maybe even ignore him entirely. Instead, she had evolved. She had taken control of her story without him. And in that moment, he realized she had always been the kind of person who would. Over the next weeks, Evelyn didn't just survive, she thrived. Clients who had been loyal to Brighton and Cole reached out directly to her, seeking her guidance. A small consultancy she started quietly began to grow, fueled by trust and long-term relationships she had built over years. Social media mentioned her work, but it was the word-of-mouth praise that mattered most. Lucas watched from the agency office as his carefully curated plans failed to gain traction. Numbers dipped. Clients questioned decisions. Strategies he had championed seemed hollow. It wasn't revenge. Evelyn never sought it. She simply did what she had always done: lead with skill, integrity, and respect. Yet the impact was undeniable. Every time Lucas checked the client list or sat through a presentation, he noticed names he recognized, now aligned with Evelyn. Every time a longtime client left Brighton and Cole quietly, he felt the weight of the word he had used so casually, outdated. One late afternoon, Lucas received an invitation to meet her for coffee. He debated ignoring it, but something in him, a mix of curiosity, regret, and admiration, pushed him to accept. They met in a small cafe near the waterfront, far from offices and business cards. Evelyn arrived, calm, composed, a notebook in hand, but no hint of office tension. She ordered a latte and smiled as she spotted him. "I'm glad you came," she said. No accusation, no bitterness, just clarity. Lucas nodded, trying to find the words to explain months of reflection. "I realized something important," he admitted. "I underestimated you, your experience, your ability. Something the agency can't replace." Evelyn listened, patient but guarded. She had no intention of returning to Brighton and Cole. She had discovered that her value wasn't tied to a job title or a corner office. Her worth was in her skill, her judgment, and her ability to make people trust her. She had walked away from something that didn't respect her, only to find opportunities that did. Lucas continued. "I wanted to understand how you did it, how you managed to build relationships, keep clients, and maintain loyalty for so long. I thought I could modernize everything without learning from what came before, and I was wrong." Evelyn smiled faintly, stirring her latte. "Sometimes the past is what prepares you for the future," she said. Her voice carried warmth, and for the first time, Lucas noticed how naturally she led people not by authority, but by presence. Over the next hour, he talked not as boss and employee, but as two professionals who had shared a history, albeit a complicated one. She spoke of her plans, the clients she was advising, the small victories that made her feel alive again. Lucas listened, realizing that he had lost more than just an employee. He had lost a guiding force that night. As Evelyn walked back to her apartment along the waterfront, she felt a quiet sense of victory, not the kind that humbles others, but the kind that strengthens oneself. She had endured the shock, the humiliation, and the uncertainty. She had not only survived, but found a new path that honored her talent and her values. Lucas, alone in his office, stared at the client reports and presentations on his desk. He understood finally that the word outdated had been more about his perspective than hers. She wasn't outdated. She was timeless in the skills, judgment, and human connection that he had dismissed so easily. Weeks turned into months, and the industry began to take notice. Evelyn's consultancy grew steadily. Brighton and Cole, under Lucas's leadership, struggled to retain long-term clients. He had innovation, but she had trust, relationships, and respect, things that couldn't be bought with strategy alone. When they met again at another industry event, the tension was gone. There was a mutual recognition, a quiet understanding of each other's worth. Lucas had learned humility. Evelyn had discovered freedom. There was no bitterness, only a shared acknowledgement that sometimes the hardest exits lead to the strongest. Entrances that night, as the city lights reflected in the windows of her new office. Evelyn Harper realized something vital. Walking away with grace was its own kind of power. She didn't need to prove Lucas wrong. Her work and her reputation did that naturally. And Lucas read, observing from afar, understood something else. Sometimes the people we underestimate aren't outdated. They're simply beyond what we can yet comprehend. Evelyn Harper's story didn't end with a pink slip or a forced exit. It continued with resilience, respect, and quiet victory. And the look she gave Lucas that night, calm, confident, unshakable, was a reminder that true power doesn't come from position or title. It comes from integrity, skill, and the courage to keep moving forward no matter who doubts you. By the time the next industry gala came around, Evelyn had become a figure people admired not just for her expertise, but for the poise with which she reclaimed her life. And Lucas, standing in the corner, watching her effortlessly connect with clients and colleagues, finally understood that sometimes losing someone is the only way to see their true value. It wasn't about regret or revenge, it was about understanding. Evelyn Harper had been underestimated, and now she was unstoppable. Her future was hers, unbound by anyone else's idea of what was modern or outdated. And that, she realized, was the most powerful look of all.